To my RoboFun audience, I am Laura Hart, the CEO and founder of RoboFun, and I'm here for my weekly heart to heart, which hopefully will be with Gary Stager in about 5 minutes. We're having technical difficulties, which if we don't solve, Gary will come back in 2 weeks. But I must give credit. My son was like, why don't you just give them a state of what's going on in RoboFun? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a little report on what's going on at RoboFun and what I see as a 24-year-old, not 24, well, good news, 24 years of running a business. My state of the business will happen in a few weeks, but in the meantime, we got Gary. All right, hold on. Hey, we so glad to see
Hey,
you,
good to
Gary.
see you. I'm just trying to get my audio to work. If you just give me 1 second.
Sure, I can hear you perfectly. While we're
Okay.
doing this, I'm going to just give a few comments about RoboFun. RoboFun is a 24-year-old company, and we help kids love to learn by making cool projects digitally. So our kids learn to code, they learn about uh, robotics, animation, and circuitry in Minecraft. And right now, we're running an amazing summer camp, and it happens for a week at a time. You can have your child with us in the morning, you can have your child with us in the afternoon, or you can have your child with us all day long. Go to robofun.org. If you like what you see, it really helps us as a small business surviving a pandemic. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, check us out. Because I think what our claim to fame is that we love children and we love making them happy in their learning experience. So now I'm going to turn the focus to Gary, my friend and colleague. Gary and I have known each other probably for 30, 35 years. We're both in the same field, and Gary's done amazing, amazing work. And to start with, good morning. It's 3 hours earlier. So it's 9 a.m. in California. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
How are you?
I've been good. Tired. I'm been packing and schlepping, getting ready for our summer institute, which is starting up after a 2-year pandemic hiatus soon. So, shipping dozens of boxes that I can barely lift across country.
So what? Wait. Let's do a little pitch for your amazing workshop. Tell everybody about it, and I'll put up the website if you'd like.
So,
If you're over
sure,
enrolled.
sure. So, no, absolutely not. So, Constructing Modern Knowledge is July 25th to 28th in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Wow.
Um, it's been sort of probably the best work I've ever been associated with, of creating a 4-day long utopian learning environment for educators that's free of coercion and curriculum and instruction. And there's a mountain of materials and a fabulous faculty that I've become quite fond and reliant on. Um, and um, a great emphasis on learning by doing, punctuated by occasional conversations with some leading thinkers and doers and innovators. So this year's guest speakers include progressive education icon Alfie Kohn, a woman named Kate Schuster, who runs something called the Hard History Project, which is helping museums and libraries and universities make primary source historical documents available digitally to kids so that they can construct their own historical knowledge. And a friend and hero of mine, Peter Martin, who's one of the great jazz pianists of our age, who has figured out how to use the web to teach people to do the impossible, which is to be improvisational musicians. It's kind of the exact opposite of Zoom school. If you want to learn how to play the bass with Ron Carter or Christian McBride, or piano with some great pianists and other instruments as well, he's built an entire community and is using the web in extraordinary ways. So, among the other things that I'm worrying about is, besides catering and hotels and airports and boxes of stuff and toys, and is getting a piano into the classroom. But be that as it may, it ties into what we're going to be talking about this morning, because constructing modern knowledge is completely rooted in everything that I've learned from Seymour Papert and Cynthia Solomon. Cynthia won't be with us this year, but she's been at CMK almost every year since we began. And the event changes the lives of teachers. We ask them to take off their teacher hat and put on their learner hat, which is something that I learned from Papert, and to be selfish with the experience. But it invariably comes back to lessons that they could apply to their own teaching in their own classrooms. And we find out sometimes 4, 5, 7 years later that the events had a remarkable impact on people.
That's
Folks
fantastic.
have said things like, they create the school that we've dreamed of in overnight. It can't be that hard. And I'll tell you one quick anecdote. We've noticed over doing this over 15 years that folks follow a fairly predictable emotional arc. That they begin the institute. We get to know each other and say, what do you want to make? And then people bunch up, and preschool teachers from Iowa work with Costa Rican chemistry teachers, and all of a sudden these projects take form. And what we found is that in the early years, when we weren't quite as good at setting the expectations, people would disappear the second morning. And we had a woman tell us one year, she said, Tuesday morning I felt stupid. Our project didn't work. I wasn't all that fond of the people I was working with, who we don't assign in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, one of my favorite things that happens year after year is we'll have this amazing project created by 15 people, and then there'll be something done by one guy in the corner that we never saw happening. And we often have projects that are revealed that we didn't even know were underway. So anyway, she said, I felt stupid. Our project wasn't working. I wasn't fond of my teammates. And I packed the car. I was ready to go. And I went to get a cup of coffee before I drove off. And just as I took a sip of coffee, the solution to our bug came to me. And I threw the coffee in the bin, and I ran back to the institute. And I told my friends what I figured out, and they said that they were worried about me, and look at the amazing project we created. And we said, oh, that's terrific. She says, yeah, but that's not the lesson I'm taking with me. I said, well, what's the lesson? She said, well, the moral of the story is, when do my students get a cup of coffee?
Right. Yeah.
And anyone who's ever made
That's
anything,
story.
anyone who's ever made anything, or particularly who's ever programmed anything, knows that as soon as you turn your back on the problem, the solution emerges.
Right. So Gary and I share this amazing history. I ran for about also 15 years a workshop similar to Gary's, and I used to divide the learners into delvers and God, I'm forgetting the other word I used. The people that kind of checked things out along the edges, watchers, I think, and both found amazing things. But those cups of coffee are incredibly important. Not that we want kids to have coffee necessarily, but the moments of reflection, and the moments of not having to be in the middle of it to start to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, this is so constructingmodernknowledge.com. We still have spaces. It's kind of the Cirque du Soleil of teacher professional learning experiences. It's a labor of love. I don't know how much longer I can keep it up. We literally ship dozens of cases of stuff back and forth across the country, and it's backbreaking, and it's a year-long marketing effort, as you might imagine. And we know that it changes the lives of teachers and the kids that they serve. And we've done it entirely without any kind of institutional support, year after year after year. This year, we're in a fabulous facility in Chattanooga with like a state-of-the-art fab lab with hot and cold running everything. And that's been keeping me up at night too, because it's going to change the nature of the experience. Because I know there will be folks who think that they need to touch every piece of hardware.
And what is your thinking about that?
I hope that doesn't happen.
Okay.
And I'm going to do everything in my power.
Because I completely agree with you that I think what you're getting at is it's not about the hardware.
Well, we're
Not
it is if you need the hardware to do what you want to do.
right. Right.
But the doing is so we'll have the ability to cut steel with surgical precision, and we have a half dozen liquid resin 3D printers and CNC machines and industrial size laser cutters and one of the concerns that I have about the maker movement is that while we've made it possible to make things with bits and atoms, we've left the bits behind again.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and constructing modern knowledge was rooted in not only Papert and Solomon's ideas of computation and kids computing and learning by computing, but it actually emerged from a lot of conversations I had with Seymour, where we'd read an article written by one of our progressive education allies, and go, "Oi, why do they say such stupid things about computers or about modernity?" And I'd say to
Mm-hmm.
Seymour, can't we get them in a room with us and show them what we're talking about? And so little by little, over years, I've done it myself. So, Alfie Kohn gets it, and Deborah Meyer says this is wholly consistent with my life's work. I never thought of computers in any other way but dystopian. And Nicole Hannah-Jones was at Constructing Modern Knowledge before the 1619 Project. And we've had Jonathan Kozol and James Lowen and astrophysicists, and we've had 3 or 4 MacArthur winners, Pulitzer Prize winners, 3 or 4 Grammy winners, jazz legends like Jimmy Heath and Barry Harris, who see what we're doing with all this stuff wholly consistent with their life's work. Of what Jimmy Heath said, what was good is good. So I'm trying to think about ways of, again, we don't want to talk anyone into anything, and I certainly don't want to force them into anything, and sort of inspire them to not want to be tourists touching all the furniture.
Right.
And one of the metaphors that I've been thinking about, Stephen Levy writes about in his great book Hackers, talking about the origins of hacker culture at MIT and then beyond, and that a lot of what we do with computers today has its roots in the Model Railroad Club of the 1950s.
Hmm.
And he described, you talked about 2 communities. The 2 communities in the Model Railroad Club was the below the table people and the above the table people.
Okay, so can you elaborate on that?
Well, the above the table people were the ones who were making it pretty and making
Right.
trains and mountains and things, and the people below the table were making it all go. So we had a project at CMK a couple of years ago that you would have loved. Group of teachers wanted to build a machine made entirely out of Lego that would fold and launch paper airplanes.
In 1 week, they wanted to create this. Wow.
4 days. Oh no. We've had much crazier stuff. About 5 years ago, a group of teachers decided they wanted to make Schuber. Schuber was when you click your heels together, a car is called for you. And this wasn't something you make on a trifold, science fair poster about someday in the future. This group of teachers, they just did it. Someone said, "Hey, the API for Uber is available." They just did it. And they were just folks, and if you ask them year after year, what prior experience you have, none. And there was no instruction in any of this. Every year I buy stuff from Adafruit or SparkFun, or I find it online somewhere, and we're opening up the boxes, and someone says, "What the hell does this thing do?" I don't know, but it looked interesting and I bought it. And sure enough, it'll find its way into a project. So anyway, these teachers made this machine that was going to fold and launch paper airplanes out of Lego. And we've got fabulous video of them explaining how it works. And it was
I think you need to come back with that video, Gary.
I'll have to find it. But it was entirely theoretical. They kept saying things like, "Well, of course the Lego's not strong enough to do this. But if it was, it would do the following." And what I loved about it was they had this complete conceptual machine that had the materials been, more precise, stronger, better, whatever terms you want to use. They were wholly confident that this thing was complete. They were like thinking like Da Vinci, right? Sure we can fly. I just don't have the stuff.
Mhm.
And they didn't view this in any way, shape, or form as a failure because they were completely confident that it would work. They just didn't have the right stuff. And then the last thing that happened was for a number of years we had the great gift of having what Edith Ackerman with us. I can't believe the
Mhm.
name just escaped me. This amazing learning theorist whose life's work was at the intersection of design and child development, and she worked for Papert, von Glosserfeld, and Piaget. Um,
Wow.
and at the end of one of the CMK institutes, when everyone was showing the projects that they had created, which sometimes are so big or so fragile we can't actually move them, so everyone just sort of does a gallery walk. Edith said, in a perfect world, she said, these projects are spectacular, and you've obviously learned a ton, and you've learned a lot about learning. But in a perfect world, we would leave everything just where it is, and we would go home for the weekend, and on Monday we would come back and look at all the projects with fresh eyes.
Mhm.
And that's the great limitation of much of what we do. We never get to look at this stuff again. We
Right.
never get to build on it or think about it.
Right.
So anyway, so that's what I'm currently in the middle of, and trying to get as much tennis in as possible before I hit the road for 3 weeks and eat junk food.
Okay. All right. So I just want to say that a lot of the way I've developed our programs at RoboFun are very, very much like this. Not nearly as I would say out there with, but we don't have the kids as long as you have, But the idea is to get people to get in the mode of what do I want to build and how am I going to make this, and how would technology play a role? So we brought you here.
The scarcest resource in schools is time.
Yeah.
And we have to deal with this time issue. It's inexcusable. I mean, my concern about everything that's happening is kind of rooted in when did they get good at anything?
Right.
We're going to have CS for all. What does that look like? What would they actually be able to do if we were serious about it?
Right. Right. So, Gary, we could keep going in the way that we're going, or we could talk about this, and I'm leaving this up to you. We
No,
have about 12 more minutes.
oh, I
So,
thought we had more time. Sure. So, okay.
but
Let's talk
Gary,
about
I am completely happy to keep going on the vein we're going and have you come back in a couple weeks to talk about your book. It's really up to you. And I'm also completely happy. I don't know if you'd want to do this while you're running your workshop in Chattanooga to do a session and to see what's going on. And you can think about that. You don't have to
it
answer
might be too
right.
much plate spinning for me, but we can try.
Right. Okay. So how would you like to spend our remaining time this morning?
If you got more stuff you want to talk about, we can do that, or I could talk about the book. I'm prepared for either one.
Why don't you talk about how you get people past the Tuesday morning where they want to leave because it feels It feels too hard, feels too unstructured. How would you describe that? Because I think that's a really important moment for parents,
So
for educators, because I think sometimes we do the thing of making education too prescribed. You're going to do this, then this, then this, where the learner isn't engaged enough. So what you're doing, Gary, is kind of taking away all of that, and that's a pretty scary thing, I think. Does that make sense?
sure. So I think you're describing some sort of debilitating feeling of frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, it blows my mind that professional educators can't cope with a few hours of being frustrated. That's extraordinary to me. Now, how do I deal with it? One of the things I talk about when we introduce the institute before we let everyone go is I'd say there's two kinds of frustration. There's mouth up frustration and mouth down frustration.
Right.
Mouth up frustration is when you're trying to get your Lego paper airplane factory to work. You're kind of smiling and Papert taught me that the best projects push up against the persistence of reality. You're just dealing with the persistence of reality. Mouth
Okay.
down frustration. Yeah.
I just want to back up for those people going, what the heck are these two people talking about? I want to sort of encapsulate it, although I've never been to your workshop, and I think I'm coming next year if I am allowed to. But I'm imagining it as, for me at least, a kid in a technical candy store where there's materials like crazy, meaning all different building making materials, and then there
And
are
rubber chickens and plastic cows that poop gumballs and yeah.
okay, okay. And there are very talented people who can support people in moving ideas that they, okay. So for instance, one of my ideas, which I actually not sure we could do there, is that I like to swim and I completely lose track of the number of laps that I do. And I want to be able to bang on something at the end of each lap. So that would be, maybe I would come to your workshop with that idea. Like, how do I build something, which I don't think is very hard to build?
Well,
Is that
so let me
Yep.
yeah, so let me tell you what happens. We get to get and I've developed a little bit of a sense of pacing and drama with this. We want to get people to doing as quickly as possible. So there are no icebreakers. We don't introduce each other. I tell them who the faculty are, point to the restrooms. I ask how many of you are elementary school teachers, middle school teachers, high school teachers, something else. How many of you who came the furthest, who drove the shortest distance, who teaches in a school named for a tree, for a dead president, for a poet, right? And that's it. And then I say to them things like just mouth up, mouth down frustration. Mouth down frustration is your hard drive crashed or your transmission fell out of your car. Right? That's not productive in any way. It's just stuff that happens. So, being able to differentiate between those two levels of frustration is important. The next thing I tell them is that we've been doing this for a long time, and you may feel uncomfortable, but I assure you, I guarantee if you can get to 12:01 on Tuesday, everything will click and you'll be accelerating downhill and you'll be worried about this ending too soon. So just suspend your disbelief and trust us. Take off your teacher hat, put on your learner hat, be selfish with the experience. If you need to get a breath of fresh air, if lunch needs to take more time, whatever you need to do, that's all good. But I assure you, you're going to get through this and everything's going to be fine. And then we go through a ritual that was inspired by my work with Dan and Molly Watt in the 80s. And we ask people for suggestions of things that they'd like to make. Not I want to learn to use the laser printer or laser cutter or Photoshop, something you want to make.
Okay,
and,
so
and I will say
that right there is a very, very important distinction. People are not going to constructing modern knowledge to know how to use tech tools, although they will maybe in the process. They're going to become more excited about learning again and to make things that are important to them. Is that correct?
Yes, except the technology is never neutral. And
Okay.
and they usually leave with tech skills that are like exponentially greater than they would have gotten in a any kind of course anywhere, because they've done something that matters to them.
How to use your laser printer course, you're saying?
Yeah, or a laser cutter, or yeah, whatever. But
Cutter.
I'm struggling. But I'm struggling with a little bit of hypocrisy on my own, because in the back of my head, there's a whole lot of technology that I'd really like people to spend some time with.
Yep.
But I'm not going to impose that on them, and I'm trying to figure out ways to like inspire some of that. Right. And maybe that's just my own, maybe that's just me projecting because it's stuff that I should be spending more time learning how to do. But I think that technology always influences behavior.
Yep.
Right? And what we learn. So I make no apologies for trying to master some piece of technology, even though if the technology is any good, it's constructive and open ended and has a low threshold and high ceiling.
Wait. Before you go, I mean, so much of what you're saying, I completely understand, but I don't want to lose our audience. So when you say low threshold and high ceiling, what does that mean?
That you immediately have a sense you can do something with this.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as you do something, it inspires something else that you want to do. Right.
Okay.
That it's like snacking, you just want more of it.
So it's something, it's an idea or a skill that you can enter easily and you can go deep.
Environment, material tools, right? Lego called it extended play value,
Mhm.
right? There's a lot of stuff the schools are buying in the ed tech space that's better than Math Blaster, but it's still just a toy, and toys are
Right.
okay, but you don't have the extended play value of
In
a
other words, there are not.
logo or a Wolfram language, or the fact that we can now program Game Boys. You run classes, everyone runs classes in how to make games. When did kids get to make a new game? When did they get to make a game that feels and looks like what it is that they think a game is? Well, now they have the ability to do that, or it's closer than it's ever been. So there's these environments mostly computational environments that I really wish that we had some time to sort of mess about in. And then we say, so what do you want to make? And people say crazy things. And I mean, I'll give you two quick examples. One guy one year said, I want to make massage shorts. And I dropped the mic. And he came up to me a few hours later, really upset. He said, oh, you made my idea sound dirty. I said, with all due respect, sir, you wanted to make massage shorts. Anyway, we had a young teacher from Florida who came to CMK 5 times. And that's another extraordinary thing. What class does someone take 5 times? But she knew that it was a space where she could do things that she couldn't do otherwise. She needed the time and the space and the culture.
How many people generally come?
100, 150.
Wow.
We have
In one
100 this
group?
year. It's like, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, and we've done it in like a giant armory. I mean, it's literally it's nuts. I mean, and it got better when we put everyone in the same room.
Mhm.
It's loud and it's buzzy, and and we fly drones over people's heads, and there's stuff explode. It doesn't matter. There's saws going. It doesn't matter. It's better. When we went to a giant space, it not only changed the size of the projects, we ended up with things that 3 people were inside of, literally.
Mhm.
But it also changed the size of the teams that worked on projects, which I could have never anticipated. We went from things that happened with 2-3 people at a table to things that happen with 10 or 12 or 15 people working in a skunk works operation in various parts of the facility. But anyway, this teacher would come 5 times. The last year she was with us, said she wanted to make an animated Marie Antoinette wig. And
Uh-huh.
she made this incredibly beautiful paper folded sculpture about 3 feet above her head that had flowers all in this monochromatic paper folding and cutting, and birds that flew around it, and bees that shot out of it, and when she tilted her head it chirped, and it was this beautiful work of art which had achieved all the educational objectives of any robotics course anywhere. Except it wasn't a truck that kills some other school's truck. It
Yeah.
was a beautiful animated Marie Antoinette wig.
And what
So what do
environment?
I'll tell you one more project, which is
Sure.
kind of in the spirit of what you do at RoboFun. And this is probably 10 years ago now. A group of teachers, a really large group of teachers, built a castle they used all of the cardboard boxes in New England. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And it had every kind of Lego from WeDo to EV3. It had Arduinos in it. It had, there might have been a Raspberry Pi. And it was a castle that defends itself. So it shot at its enemies. It had a drawbridge that went up and down. It had turrets that spun. And it was 15 feet wide, 6 feet
So
high.
I'm gathering that any kind of technology platform is there. So like Lego Spike would be there, Arduino would be there, anything that can move people forward. Is that
It's going to be a lot of microbit. And frankly, we don't have any Lego Spike this year because I don't know how to get any.
okay? All right.
We just shipped 35 pounds of Lego,
Right.
but I just took all the microcontrollers out because I don't have the modern stuff, and because the microbit is great and affordable.
Would you
and
like my help on that front or no? Because I could probably push that
yes,
forward.
it's yes.
It's in
I've done everything
When-
I know how to do.
When does it start?
The 25th of July.
Okay. There's still
So
time. I
anyway,
can get some Lego. Anyway,
yeah.
but
So
not
anyway,
that fast.
so then we ask. So people say with the projects that they have ideas for, and then and our faculty is running around the room writing them on giant post-it notes. And
Okay.
then the thing I learned from Dan and Molly Watt, I've modified in some ways, is we ask everyone to look at all of the project ideas. We give it plenty of wait time. Look at all the crazy ideas that are written around the room, and then come up, grab a pen, and write your name down under any project that interests you. And you could sign up for 37 of them if you like. And I use the word sign up very loosely because you're going to hear in a minute what happens. And then we say, here's a pile of paper, blank paper. If you feel really strongly about a project that you want to have happen,
Yep.
write it on this piece of paper and go out in the hallway and, like Norma Ray, hold it up above your head. You're not a leader. You have no responsibility. You're just a beacon. You're just a buoy, and people who are interested in a project will gather with you, and then you go do it. If no one gathers with you, you have two choices. You can combine with some other project, abandon the idea, do it by yourself. And then we lead people into Willy Wonka's factory, which we open the doors and they see this environment with, inflatable mooses and crazy stuff and piles of junk. And we've captured some great images of people's faces lighting up like it's Christmas morning. And then that's it. That's it. There's no instruction.
Okay. So
Except
here's
if
an interesting.
somebody needs, except I've got a fabulous, I just want to say, I've got a fabulous team of people who I can raise an eyebrow or point in a direction. They'll go over and provide exactly the amount of intervention that's necessary as quickly as possible to help the people get over the obstacle that they're overcoming. And we've
Right.
had a kid, I'll just tell you this one last quick story that I know you'll love. I met this kid named Skylar St. Ledger when he was 11 at Maker Faire. He was one of the heroes of the Maker movement when Make Magazine started. He was like Super Awesome Sylvia and a couple other kids. Skylar's father tells a story about taking Skylar to a Maker Faire when he was 9 or 10 years old and losing his kid and being terrified and finding him 2 hours later working someone's booth. When Skylar was in middle school, I would forever see adults coming up to him and grabbing him by the collar and saying, "Skylar, you got to stop calling me at 3 a.m, dude." And the kid knows everything. He knows how to do everything. He's completely out of his mind. And year after year, I said to my partner, Sylvia Martinez, we need to hire Skylar. And she said, we're not hiring an 11-year-old. And so when he turned 18, we started bringing him to CMK. And again, one of the tacit lessons that I hope these teachers learn is that we have on the record a number of teachers who have said, Skylar saved my life. We had T-shirts made one year that said, escalate to Skylar, because people like James Deck and Josh Berker, who know everything there is to know about microcontrollers and electronics, I would hear them saying things like, I'm going to need to escalate to Skylar. And I would hope that any number of teachers who interacted with Skylar left thinking, I've got nutty kids in my classroom.
Right.
Maybe they're a resource. Maybe they're an ally.
So we are going to have to wrap up, but I am so excited and I wish I could change my life and come on the 25th of July. But two questions for you. One, why do you make the decision of asking people for all of their ideas before seeing resources? That's my first question. Do you understand the question?
Yeah, I understand the question. It's quicker. It's less deliberative.
Because you think if they see all of the possibilities, they're going to get stuck on the technology versus on the idea.
It's purer. And I think, I think to come back to, I'm going to say something sort of impolitic, that to come back to how do you get the teachers to overcome their concerns and their anxiety? And there's a certain amount of me that doesn't care. We help people. The faculty is male and female. They're from all over the place. They teach at every grade level. They're folks I can trust. There's always someone I know who does pastoral care better than I do. There's someone who knows electronics better than I do, right? So that we've got a team that can handle almost anything.
Right.
But there's a certain amount of I'm just not giving that any oxygen. We had a woman one year burst into tears during the brainstorming activity. And when we went into the giant, Wonka land, she was inconsolable. And Laura, some of these personalities, so I was amazed by this. This is someone crying in a workshop before anything's actually happened. And I sent Dan Watt over to talk to her. Dan Watt's Mr. Rogers. And he couldn't console her. And a great teacher friend of mine who was on the faculty took her by the hand and said, I will show you all the projects and all the technology, and I'll help you through this. And she eventually stormed out. She's a tech director. She was a school district tech director. I'm thinking to myself, maybe you should surrender your license on the way out as well. This is not good.
Right.
No, but right. So there's a certain amount of I've used this analogy before because I don't want to come off as sort of harsh or about this. If you watch toddlers building block towers, they only cry if the adults see it fall. If the adults don't see it fall, they giggle and they build a bigger tower. So a lot of the way that this is structured is to create the space where they giggle and build a bigger tower. That I talked about. I want them to have that sort of Christmas morning feeling, as opposed to dreading being at some professional development experience. And also, when the maker movement blew up and our numbers hit close to 200. Things changed, and not always for the better. And it wasn't just because the group got bigger, because I'm confident that we could run this with 1,000 people. What changed was the emphasis on the tools. And people started bringing their own tools. They were showing up with stuff. And that was kind of interesting too. But it also meant that there were people who we couldn't stop hammering during a piano solo. And so they just had kind of different objectives. So I try to keep the experience literally as pure as possible. And we point out to them at the end, hey, in case you didn't notice, there was no schedule, there was no coercion, there was no curriculum, there was no instruction. We do. I mean, I've thought through a lot of this stuff. Some of it was necessity is the mother invention.
Yeah.
I'm too cheap to rent a screen for a projector. I just refuse to rent a screen for $12 an hour or whatever, stupid hotel prices or whatever. So we get Post-it notes and we put them up at the front of the room and we make a screen out of these giant Post-it notes. So when you walk into Constructing Modern Knowledge, you see, oh, if I need something, I can make it.
Right.
If I need something, I can solve the problem.
Right. I'm loath to point this out, but some part of me thinks it would be interesting to point out. Your level of sympathy for a child who doesn't have the space to get a cup of coffee because of the way our schools do things, contrasting to your comment about not holding teachers' hands too much. It's an interesting contrast, and I get it. But
can I put?
Yeah, of course. That's why I brought it up.
It's wholly consistent.
Okay.
Because with the kids, letting them get a cup of coffee is wholly consistent with just do what you need to do. When I worked in the prison, my doctoral research was based on creating this alternative learning environments out of prison for teenagers, which was very much like what we do at CMK, except we had the kids every day for long periods of time. If a kid said to me, I'm ADHD or I'm alphabet soup or I'm illiterate, I'd say, wow, that might be a problem. And I'd hand them something to do. I just didn't give any oxygen to it. And we had a teacher at CMK who one year just wouldn't join any group and was kind of sitting on the periphery. And she wasn't one of these people who was just going group to group, writing down URLs. You always get one of those people, the collectors.
Right.
They're like in the military. They want to look. Yeah.
What I found when I ran these is we had delvers and lurkers, and they both got a lot out of it. But
there's another category, which is the sort of quartermaster. The folk. You walk around with the clipboard, so you look busy. but you're not really engaged. So if you write down all the URLs of what people are doing, anyway, but this woman was sitting on her own, and we did everything. Hey, why don't you join the group? Hey, great to see you. Hey, what you working on? Hey, show me, all that kind of stuff. Have you met Dan? Have you met Amy? Have you met Angela? Hey, did you see what those guys are doing over there? And finally, Sylvia went over and sat down next to her. And she said, look, I'm at a crossroads in my career, and I'm just trying to decide what I'm going to do next. And this is really valuable. And so you make every attempt to engage the folks, and then at some point they'll come to it.
Right. I'm very glad I brought it up because it felt like such a dichotomy, and you're right, it isn't a dichotomy at all. So
yeah, I mean, I feel the most effective as a teacher when I'm in the back of the room, like, I call it lawn chair teaching.
Oh no, I felt the same when I was a teacher, and I was in a boys' school that had very few women's bathrooms. This is not a ridiculous story. And my kids were going...
Be a guy elementary teacher.
Right. So what I found is I could slip out. No one would even know I was gone. Use the bathroom very quickly, rush back up. Now, by the way, I would never do that today for our RoboFun kids, so parents don't have to worry. But that was a moment where I knew everything was really great because my kids didn't need me. They were so engaged.
And I've actually, because I'm really in favor of like radical transparency. I was running a workshop in Switzerland where we were using the Hummingbird robotics kit, and I said, I'd like everyone to make a hole at a miniature golf course. And I showed them, these are motors, this is the board, we program it in Snap, go. And folks took off, and in the next 90 minutes, 2 hours, we had these incredibly elaborate, full on, I had little putters and balls, and we had this full on miniature golf course that was animated and computerized. And at the end of it, not only did we celebrate what they had done, but I told them exactly how many emails, blog posts, and websites I had created or during the time that they were doing it. Because I literally did something like, I wrote 5 blog posts, and I fixed like 4 websites, and I answered 60 pieces of email. And I was the only teacher, and there's about 50 of them.
Right, because you were lawn chair teaching. So yeah. I want to end by just saying a few things. Gary, we're coming back in a couple weeks. We'll figure it out. I'll call you. That's number 1. Number 2, yes, I want to talk about your book. Number 2, when I ran this workshop with Seymour, a workshop like this called the Stone Ancient Retreat, which I keep thinking about bringing back on an island in Maine. I brought up an amazing person that Gary knows named Dr. Bakhtiar Mikak. And we were teaching these people robotics, and everyone came with their family that week. And we had like a ton of 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds. So a part of me is trying to figure out how to support everyone. So I hired somebody to take all the 6, 7, and 8-year-olds to a miniature golf course nearby. And I announced this to Gary. I'm not sure if I announced it to you, you'd have the same reaction to Bakhtiar. And he was really mad at me. And I'm like, what did I do wrong? I'm trying to take care of it. He's like, we all should go to the miniature golf. There's so many good examples of how we can create things. I'm like, oh, you're right. Yep, totally. But so
or not go to the miniature golf after they've created stuff, and then look at the projects with fresh eyes and then make them again or make them better.
Right.
We had and what's been fun too is it's been an opportunity. I just want to say this. One of the other reasons why I've created CMK is not only to build a bridge between the progressive education community and the constructionism community or the tech community, whatever you want to call it, and to have it go in both directions. Nothing has brought me more joy than sharing my friends and heroes and sheroes with educators, or helping my heroes and sheroes and legends in education and in other fields think about the capacity and capability and competence and creativity of teachers in a new light. And one of our mutual colleagues, Jose Valente, one of the early Logo Group people, who's a professor in Brazil, was on our faculty one year. And he literally took me aside and said, what are you thinking? What are we doing here? Why do you have Stephen Wolfram, arguably the world's most important and significant mathematician, computer scientist, won a MacArthur Genius Award at 20 years old. And Carlo Rinaldi, who runs the municipal preschools of Reggio Emilia, and jazz musicians as our speakers. And I said, I want everyone to make sense of that for themselves.
Very nice answer. I think that is a perfect way to end our talk for today, but you've just earned a spot at least quarterly on the Heart to Hearts. Maybe selfishly, because I love these conversations. And you said such wonderful things about my conversations with Cynthia Solomon, who I will also bring back soon.
No, you got stuff out of Cynthia that I've never heard before, and I've spent a lot of time with Cynthia.
Cool. So another pitch for RoboFun, we are having an amazing summer, and fortunately and unfortunately for Gary right now, we are using the Lego Spike, and I have to say, I really wish Seymour Papert could see what these kids are creating. And in a few weeks, I'm going to come and do a heart-to-heart alone or with some of these kids and show, because it's pretty darn right the kind of making we all dreamed about 50 years ago, and we're going to talk about when we talk about Gary's book. So thoughts for you, go to robofun.org to learn more. If you liked this conversation, please share it. And if you have a child in the New York City area, camp goes for a week at a time. We also do birthday parties, private lessons, both online and in person. And we're doing great stuff. Gary's doing great stuff. And I'm just happy to be more in touch with you, Gary. And I want to.
That's great. Thanks.
I'll call you, but I want you to assign somebody, and we'll do a heart-to-heart directly from CMK, which will get you more people for the future years. So if you want more people.
From your mouth to God's ears. Okay.
All right. Big hug to all of my audience and to Gary and to Sylvia, and we'll be in touch. So
see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you for people watching. Lena Cohen, thank you for your comment. I'm not sure I'd understand it. Svetlana Shaparovo. Do you understand that, Gary?
I didn't see it. I'd have to figure out where the comment is.
Okay. It's okay. We've done a beautiful talk today. We'll talk about that later. And have a great day, everyone.